Yes, டைக்கு பாய் சொல்லுங்க. VIP hair color shampooக்கு மாறுங்க.
I'm certainly not qualified to speak in such distinguished company, but I'm here more as the founder of the DPF to first welcome and thank all our brilliant panelists for agreeing to spend some time with us, and second as a lifelong student to see if I can learn something from the discussions. But having engaged here, I'd maybe just throw out a couple of thoughts that have been running in my mind. Of course, at the national level, the media is dominated by the ruling party, and we have seen the degradation all the way from, alleged speaking truth to power, to keeping quiet, to becoming acquiescent tools, to becoming blatant tools of misinformation and propagation of false news. So, on the one hand, I despair that the amount of money, and as Dharani pointed out, the lack of lucrative business models without getting into bed with some of these guys. And I think especially the nexus between Facebook, Reliance, and the ruling party that has recently been exposed by the Journalists Without Borders is the prime example. So, whatever the systems of democracy, the institutions that were built to prevent this kind of capture, to prevent this kind of monopoly, oligopoly, whether it's in the markets or in the news or in elections, seems to be failing. And yet, after all of that, if I look in Tamil Nadu over the last 5 years, 2-3 election cycles, including the local body elections, maybe 4 or 5 election cycles, somehow the BJP is not able to penetrate the ecosystem and not able to kind of continue or achieve the kind of threshold of disinformation, misinformation, and control of the media, either through lit social media where we can track it, or through WhatsApp, or through anything else. And I often wonder, what is it that makes us different? Is it that we have a different language? Is it that the culture is so rooted? Is it that we have such high education levels and we have such high penetration of the internet all the way to the rural hinterlands that almost everybody has has a smartphone, and therefore people are getting information from multiple sources all the time. And other than this niche, which I will, in my experience, for those who didn't know, I set up and ran the DMK IT wing for a while, for a few years. In my experience, the most vulnerable to this kind of false propaganda and sense of kind of, what can I say, jingoistic identity politics were upper class, idle rich, relatively not engaged in the economy, relatively, old money, relatively bemoaning the loss of their dominance or the loss of their exclusive status, and looking for some reason to feel that they were patriotic or somehow contributing to society when they were not. That slice, very narrow slice, was susceptible to it. But the BJP never seemed to get past that. And I don't say the BJP for any other reason other than that they are the ruling party. They have tens of thousands of crores in electoral bonds and they dominate the media. That's all I mean. It could be any party, but the ruling party. So what is it that makes us different? What is it that prevents that kind of domination of the media? And what is it that separates us? What lessons can we learn from it for the rest of the country? These are some things that I think about, and I'll just leave them out there. Welcome everybody again, and conclude my remarks. Thank you. If I put together both Siddharth Vadrajan's points and Mr. Ram's points, some of it is very intriguing to me. Is it that if you have a relatively if you have the people's mandate in a way that the authoritarian forces cannot stop, because if you look at much of North India, if you look at Delhi, if you look at the Hindi belt, if you look at many of these places, it is the electoral victories that, the money and all of that stuff comes, but it starts with the electoral victory, and it starts with this perception of invincibility. That starts with the perception of dominance in the public sphere that really may be at the core of whatever they can then leverage for intimidation and kind of browbeating and all these other things, and including maybe leveraging the judiciary and so forth. So is it that in a place like Tamil Nadu, because the people are never going to be kind of cowed and brought down to that authoritarian kind of template, is that the basis that we still have a relatively independent press? Question one. Question two, is it that we are a relatively well-to-do state, a relatively affluent state, and there is enough business in media? There's enough revenue in media, both at the state level and at the natural economy, at the commercial level, that independent media organizations don't have to worry too much about both the carrot and the stick. And to be fair, after Ms. Jayalalitha's time, for all the other faults that I will lay at the ADMK government, they rarely engaged in the kind of legal or extrajudicial or extra constitutional kind of threatening that she used to do to the press. My friends across the aisle had many faults, but they were not authoritarian or not that aggressive in their attempts to control the media, at least in my understanding. So, with rare exceptions, maybe it is in Tamil Nadu that we are a relatively self-contained economy. We are not dependent on the center either for funds or for kind of that our mold of the average voter and the public mind is more independent. Maybe that's a result of education. Maybe that's a result of social liberation, whatever it is. But maybe those are some of the things that give you a key to having relatively independent institutions, and it is a function of time. As you have economic development, like some theories go about how the U.S. went through the same kind of what do you say, growth of democracy as the per capita income increased, and the growth of institutions as economic activity became more widespread. Maybe that's the hope for the future for a place like India. I'll just say the reverse, which is that, there was a very interesting essay by somebody about Putin, and I think it was titled the Dictator Trap. That eventually, if you browbeat all independent opinions and all kind of real data from reaching you, you can sustain this control of the media, control of the narrative for so long, but it's not infinite. At some point, the reality bursts through. I would have thought that point was the number of dead bodies floating in the Ganges and on the riverbanks, but clearly that wasn't the point. But at some other point, maybe there will be a reconciliation, and that the emperor's new clothes will be kind of exposed after all. So it's fascinating how all these components tie together, because at the core of it has to be a viable financial model. Even for some great institution like the Wire, if they're not able to at least sustain, maybe they don't live well, but the model provides sustenance. And of course, at a scale of 1.4 billion people, it may not be that hard to find sustenance for a relatively lean operation. But if you want many like that, maybe you have to have an ecosystem like Tamil Nadu, where there's enough economic activity, there's enough, the progression of democracy and the economy has reached a place where people are willing to or inclined to ask for more rights, more institutions, more reality, and that's the basis. It's hard for me to say, but it's been very thought-provoking. I've learned a lot. Thank you very much. I apologize. I had another commitment I have to run because we just finished the budget session today. But thank you again very much. We always enlightened, as we said when we started this. Ideas are the lifeblood of any movement. We feel very happy with where our movement has gotten us, but we have a long way to go, and we are immensely benefited by insights from luminaries like yourselves. Thank you.
எஸ், டைக்கு பாய் சொல்லுங்க. விஐபி ஹேர் கலர் ஷாம்பூக்கு மாறுங்க.